Welcome to After the Tower, a podcast about change and transformation. My name's Toland and I'm your host, and I'm happy to be with you here in this moment. This episode I have on Gabrielle Torre, who is an old friend of mine who currently is going through the tower moment of a very sudden recent diagnosis with leukemia. And we talk about how she's navigating this complete shift in her reality. But we also talk about some tower moments that she's experienced prior to this. One being the experience of major depression and then the sudden loss of her mother, and how those experiences have shaped her and informed how she's meeting this moment. And I think Gabrielle is so brilliant and shares about her experience so well. And I'm really excited to hear you all experience it. And so to give you some context, Gabrielle is a Cancer rising, a Leo sun, and a Scorpio moon. Gabrielle is a 1-4 self-projected projector. And Gabrielle is sharing her journey and her story on her Substack, More Cancer Thoughts from a Creative Writing Minor. You can find that at gabrielle.substack.com. I'll put that in the notes. Definitely recommend you check it out. She shares with such a humor and insight that I've really appreciated experiencing. And you can find me at tolandlawrence.com. I do human design, I do tarot, I do coaching, so go and check that out if you'd like. And now let's get to the episode. Hope you enjoy it. All right, so Gabrielle, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. We're gonna have a great conversation, I feel like. So let's just start off. How are you feeling in this moment? What's up for you in this current moment in time?
So today is a day where I've now been to 2 doctor's appointments. One was for oncology and one was a gynecologist, and both are related to the fact that I got diagnosed with leukemia about 3 to 4 weeks ago. But despite that, or because of it, today I feel good. Today I feel good. I feel healthy. I walked outside. I've eaten, had quality time with my partner and friends. Today is good. I feel good today.
But yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And I think it's just, but I appreciate you kind of entering us in. You're in a different reality now, and that's why we're
Mhm.
talking through this diagnosis. And that's kind of what we're going to explore together. But also like your story more generally and some of the experiences that you've been through and how that feeds into that. And this is an unusual episode because usually I talk to people after their experience is completed, but you
Mhm.
are in the midst. That being said, it feels right to have this conversation, and I know that you feel excited to have it. And I'm just going to name it up top. You created this like amazing Substack where you're sharing your journey and you share with like such like, I mean, you're such a great writer and you just like
Thank
articulate
you.
your
I really
ideas in
appreciate
such
that.
a
Thank you.
beautiful way. Like there's like a humor, but there is like a precision to how you speak and how you bring people into your experience. And
Thank you.
I'm really excited to have people get some of that from you because yeah, I think your voice is very yeah, it's sharp and it's clear and I think I mean, I've learned so much from you in just the things that you've shared so far. But I like to start my podcast off with like a little question just to orient everyone is how do we know each other?
Craigslist. We know each other through Craigslist. I was about to start my PhD program at Georgetown and needed a roommate to afford living in Georgetown on a PhD student stipend. So I shot my shot on Craigslist, and someone in your house answered the call, and someone from your house mailed me keys, and I showed up at your doorstep. And I lived in this weird little back room. And I think how I met you was that perhaps it's not how I met you, but it may have been my second or third interaction with you. But a blender exploded and you had to clean it up in the kitchen. And that's how we met.
That's how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget. I forgot that Vicky mailed you the keys.
Yes, someone mailed me keys. And mind you, this was pre-FaceTime, right? So we could have done a Zoom meeting or something like that. I certainly did a round of those with other potential housing situations, but she just called me on the phone. We chatted on the phone. She would have had no way of knowing if I was an actual woman or not. She just took my little word for it, mailed me keys to an actual home. And
In
I
Arizona.
took the risk of hoping those keys worked to a home with that same address. And it all worked out. Like here we are 10 plus years later, and it all worked out.
I
So
know.
the answer is Craigslist.
Craigslist, it brings people together. It brings people together, or at least it did. I'm trying to think what year
Yeah,
it was. This was 2013?
2013 or 2014. Yeah,
Yeah,
2014.
2014.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we've known each other ever since, even though
yeah.
I left DC probably a year after.
Yes, you did. And
And
then since then, it's been a bunch of movement on all our ends, but also we maintain a book club. So
yes,
that would
I'm
be another way
a
we've
member
stayed
of
in
the book
touch.
club. Yes.
Notorious book
I
club.
wasn't an original member, but I think at Allison's wedding, I got drunk and asked to be let in, and Kitty made that happen for me. And ever since, it's been such a great way to
You've been
keep
a
in
very
touch.
strong addition.
I appreciate that. I love our book club. It's so great. We all have such strong opinions, and it's fun. It's fun, and it's a great way to keep in touch with you all. So that's how we know each other. That's our context. But yeah, I think I want to start by just the the leading up to the diagnosis and what happened, and just helping us orient to like a little bit of how you got to where you are now. We'll come back to it at the end, but I just want to start people off by kind of having a grasp of like how did you get to here,
So, in terms of
the diagnosis.
the diagnosis itself,
Yeah.
so I, like I said, I got diagnosed 3 to 4 weeks ago. But prior to that, I had started a health journey at the start of this year randomly. And now I look back very fortuitously. I decided to switch my health insurance in
Mm.
open season towards the ends of last year and had this thought of, this will be my year that I get a primary care I really like. I'll go to the derm. I'll do all those health things you do in life. And so I did. I got set up with a new primary care physician who I really like and who may now have saved my life. And what happened was I met her, we did baselining work, everything came back normal in early April,
Mhm.
late March, early April. My body looks great. I'm as healthy as I've ever been. So healthy that I'm training for a 10-mile run, something I do a few times a year. But all of a sudden, I'm training for this run and feel almost unbearably sore in places you shouldn't be sore after running, like my ribs, my chest, my back, not even my legs. And this continued for 2 weeks, including the run itself. And at this point, for me to feel enough pain that I'm telling people about it and it's disrupting my life and I'm taking meds for it is bizarre. Like I feel like one of my humble brags is that I know my body. And so I just knew something was up. And so I felt really embarrassed actually and really ashamed that I went to go see her because who goes to the doctor for being sore? I
Mm.
literally went and I was like, I'm sore. And she was really understanding though, and she decided to order lab tests. And while we were waiting for those to come back, I went on a trip to New Orleans. I landed in the taxi line waiting for a taxi down to the French Quarter, and I got a call from her. And she said that my lab work came back extremely different from what she had just seen 2 weeks ago. All of my blood counts were down. It was so weird that she thought it might be fake. So she said, enjoy the weekend, but when you come back, you need to do another test immediately, either to refute or confirm what's going on here. But try not to worry, have fun, but be careful if you can. And so I do. But on this trip, I start to notice some things that feel like a sinus infection. I'm still a little sore. I'm tiring out more than usual, but I chalk that up to being a woman and the fact that, I'm like tired all the time. Even when I would met with her, she'd ask me things like, are you fatigued? To which my answer is yes, constantly. Like I am always in a constant state of fatigue as a woman. And so none of the typical symptoms of leukemia would have occurred to me as something to go see a doctor for, in ways. But so I come back, I'm feeling a little under the weather. I chalk the sinus infection up to, being on a plane and traveling and pressure of an air cabin and stuff like that. I come back, I do another blood test. I'm about to go into work on May 6th, and I'm about to head to the car when I get a phone call from her that says, your lab work is confirmed abnormal. It's real. You have to go to the ER, and I need you to pack for 2 to 3 days. I faint. And fortunately, my partner, Nick, is in the home to catch me so I don't crack my head open on something. But yeah, my essentially the diagnosis came after this lab work that showed that I had what shows on LabCorp as a quote panic level low of white blood cells and neutrophils, which are the cells to prevent you from infection. So I had like nearly none. I had none in my body, and barely any red blood cells. They needed to give me a blood transfusion almost immediately when I went to the hospital. And once I was there, they did a bone marrow biopsy. They attempted one, couldn't do it. They did it a second time, and we waited for results. And those were really, really tough days because you're sitting in a hospital not knowing if you have cancer, but knowing everyone around you is already starting to assume you have cancer. And so once they got the the bone marrow biopsy work done, they confirmed that it was acute some type of leukemia. Acute meaning this onset is exactly what happens in this type of cancer. It goes from a perfectly normal healthy body to this. Like if I were not getting treatment, I would probably die in 2 weeks from now. Is how acute it is. Like if this had not been caught and been treated, I would have been sent to an ICU, and then things could have gone very downhill from there. So I'm very fortunate about the timing of it all, actually. So that's the diagnosis. It came from a bone marrow biopsy, which came from landing my body in the hospital after fainting, after a couple of blood tests that, frankly, this nurse practitioner was like very correct to draw. I think not all primary care physicians would have had the thought to send someone sore for blood testing, and she did, and I'm forever grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think like the thing that's coming to my mind as you share that is like this dual thing of being extremely unlucky and being extremely lucky.
Yeah.
Like, and I appreciate that you're able to articulate, like, I'm so glad that those tests came through. It might have been worse. But also, I'm thinking about, like, I know you are a very active person. You take care of yourself. Like, I'm not someone who would think, and again, this is just our human way of trying to understand things that would have such a sudden onset of cancer at your young age. And so I'm just curious, like in that moment and in those days, like how was that landing for you? Like, or what was going through your mind at that time?
You phrased something that really resonates with how I was feeling. So lucky and yet so unlucky. I felt moments where I knew it was lucky that this had been caught. Like I knew that had this waited any longer, something bad would have happened. And an example of that is that the days that followed this, I was supposed to be at my sister's graduation in Tucson. And days after that, I was supposed to be in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so, what very much could have happened to me in this life is that I would have landed in a hospital somewhere in South America and been medically evacuated back here to the States, like a true, not that this isn't an emergency, but an actual dire, like life or death emergency was very much in the path for my future. So I had a lot of moments of thinking, I'm so lucky. But simultaneously, I had a lot of moments in between being in a patient being taken into the hospital and getting the diagnosis of feeling unlucky, where it ranged from this could have been a wild virus, something like mono can cause the symptoms I was having, or lupus. I don't know that anyone in their life, I'm sure others have. I actually asked the doctors because I've watched so much House MD. I was like, is this lupus? Like, can you tell me it's lupus? You know, moments where I was like pleading with the universe to have it be anything but cancer, because I knew that the worst possible option, the unluckiest option, was going to be cancer. And they were saying that that was their biggest worry, and that all of the tests they were doing were to confirm that it was or was not cancer. And so at every juncture, every test was coming back like it was cancer and not a fluke virus, not lupus, not some odd other autoimmune thing. And so, yeah, I felt this push pull of, I know I have the support system to get me through whatever this is. A lot of people don't. Like, I was looking around the hospital, seeing a lot of people just there by themselves. And that's not how I felt and have ever felt during this. I felt very grateful that I could, truly calmly walk into the ER with my packed little bag, ready for a few days. But at the same time, you're just in a hospital room waiting to be told what you know is going to be life-changing news, and that the odds of it being the news you want, those odds were very low, and we knew that the whole time. So when the diagnosis arrived, I didn't cry, I wasn't emotional. I just very much had this feeling of, what else could it be? It just made a lot of sense that it was going to be cancer, and so I kind of accepted it in the days leading up to it, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense, and it doesn't it's like I find sometimes when I'm like presented with a set of outcomes, I try to like get on board with the worst possible one so it hurts less. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and you feel like that was kind of what you were doing, or but also it sounds like they were kind of reflecting that back to you. Like, this is, yeah, it could be these other things, but really it's this kind of.
They were reflecting it back, and in ways I think perhaps maybe that's good practice. They were very consistent in saying, look, it can be X, Y, or Z, but our biggest concern is what I now have, which is cancer. And so I at least felt that there was an honesty with me that let me be honest with myself too in the few days that I was waiting for a diagnosis. Because I had moments where I felt like, I could get my hopes up, and my partner, I certainly did have moments of finger crossing and really hoping it was something, frankly, less life threatening. But by the time the diagnosis came, I did feel that the medical team had been honest enough with us that we had also honestly also come to terms with it ourselves over those days. They'd given us, and we'd given ourselves too, enough space to process. You have days too to think about this. It's not many days, but I had at least 2 to 3 days to think about the fact that the odds were ever diminishing towards being in my favor, or that side of my luck of life. And so I'd already had a few cries over the possibility of it by the time they told me, I think. That doesn't mean I haven't cried since. I certainly have. But when they told me, I had very much accepted it at that point in time.
Yeah. And I think, like, I hear what you're saying. It's like you were able to receive that and able to like move into this new reality that you were in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, like, I know from your writing and from the things that you said, it's like something you accept, but it's also, something that's hard to accept. It's a blow, it feels unfair. Like, I think about who you were, in January, and who you are now. It's a completely different reality. And you and I have talked about this, about how life can do that to us sometimes. It shifts our reality. And I know you've experienced that in the past. I think first I want to talk a bit about, yeah, how it's been for you to shift into this new reality of treating your cancer. What has that been like for you?
It's been interesting. I feel like there's a new shift. And it's kind of why I wanted to come on this podcast, which is centered so much around change. I feel like I have a new change every 48 hours, maybe on average. So there was a me who was an intake patient, and then there was a me who was processing a diagnosis, and then there was a me who was processing a diagnosis before getting treatment. There was so much anxiety about, even once I was diagnosed with cancer, there's still questions about what are the subtypes. And you can't start treatment unless all of those things are confirmed. So I spent another 3 to 4 days in this, other shell of a place, wondering what the next years of my life would be like, right? Like, what does treatment look like for me? Because it's all so different. And so after that, then there's me starting treatment, which feels so weakening. Like, I think it's weird to now say I think I feel how other cancer patients feel. It feels like your weakest self to feel attached to a pole with a bag of fluids 24/7, like you are unable to walk beyond your ward. So there was like a part of my life that lived like that. Like I was unable to use a bathroom without this port attached to me, like this pole with bags, or shower, which just felt very demoralizing at times, knowing that like if that got severed, there goes any shot I have at beating this thing. And then there's also a version of you that's still in the hospital that knows you're about to get discharged, but doesn't know what you need to do to get discharged. Like, you have to demonstrate some stability, but you don't know if your body can do that, if you can get there. And then when you get out of the hospital, which is kind of now the change I'm in, the mood from everyone around you kind of shifts. While I was in the hospital, I was constantly receiving, and gratefully so, everyone has been so kind and so giving and has sent me some of the best, vibes, energy, thoughts, everything. But it was very distracting in a good way to get those things constantly in the hospital and to open the gifts and things like that. And then all of a sudden you come home after it and you're all alone and people really aren't reaching out the same way, but you still have cancer. Like nothing for me has changed. In fact, it's only gotten, I wouldn't say worse, but now I would say navigating change, I think maybe my doctor's advice was you just have to take it day by day. And I think I may live a lot of my life now with this mindset. Like I remember literally weeks before going to the hospital, I was thinking about, when would I want to get engaged and then married and then have a kid? I had like a roadmap in mind. That's very much the type of person I am. And now it's a win if I can get through the day and feel happy with the day I had. So navigating change through all of this, what feels like the most frequent change in the smallest, most concatenated time span, has just required me to see only a few hours ahead, which is scary for someone like me, but that's okay. And I think the only way I'll be able to mentally push through this, I think. Though I think in some ways, someone else who struggled with an immunocompromised health history told me, and my doctors have said this too, I'm not a broken person. I can very much beat cancer, and I should also consider planning things out to look forward to, like there's nothing that stops me from planning a trip in a few months, right? Like it's all logistics and I can figure it out. So I'm trying to find a good balance between those things. But right now, I think I'm very reactive and fearful of planning far ahead and navigating change beyond a small radius, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that comes to mind so much in like what you just shared is like over and over and over again, you're being forced to surrender. Like you have to surrender to what is, to what's in front of you, to the changes in front of you, and to the lack of control you have in some of those things. And at the same time, you do have some control. And that's what I think, that person you were speaking to was trying to tell you. Like, you can try to plan at, you can try to focus on the future, but I keep hearing about like surrender. Like, I have to be with what is right now, and I have to be open to accepting what is and meeting this moment. And there was like a whole, plan you had for your life, and that's not this moment, and you're just, kind of accepting that. I think this one makes me want to, because a part of what we talked about is, as I said, like you've been through things in your life where you've
Mhm.
had to surrender. And this has a different quality to that, but I think it's informed how you're approaching this. And I think I want to begin, and if you feel comfortable, I know that you've had a lot of struggles with mental health and depression. And, that is its own battle. It's very different, but I'm curious if you could talk about that experience and what you kind of learned and gained through having to go through that. But just starting off with just like taking us into the period of time where you were most struggling with that and what that was like. So yeah, I'm kind of going back in time, but I told you I was going to do that before we
Yes.
before we
I
talked.
was forewarned about the time machine, but it's good because I do think that my ability a version of me 10 years ago would not have been able to cope with this the same way, I think. Like, I think all things considered, I'm doing pretty well coping with cancer, but I think I'm coping well because of other things that I've dealt with in life, to your point. So I think I first truly experienced depression when I was a teenager in high school. But when you're a teenager in high school, you chalk a lot of things up to, well, I'm annoying and life's annoying and everything's annoying. So a lot of it had that type of flavor to it. But by the time it was college and persistent, and by all means, when I say I'm lucky, it's true. Like I was very happy in college otherwise. Like I was the definition of someone who should not have been crying themselves to sleep every night. I had a boyfriend I really liked. I had a very clear path towards what I was going to do afterwards. I had great friends. All these things I've consistently had, but I just felt this gnawing pit in me constantly. I I couldn't sleep at night because I felt so scared sometimes of being alone because I was afraid I would want to hurt myself, even though I knew that I wouldn't. There were nights I drove myself to the hospital, like, and just sat in the car because I was afraid of hurting myself. Like I was that scared that I was going to do something. It was a very, at that stage in my life, like frantic kind of depression. And I think it then, by the time I went to grad school, defined how my depression and anxiety feed each other. It made me very productive in college because instead of going to sleep or being alone in my apartment, I would stay up at these 24/7 coffee shops that, of course, are ubiquitous around college campuses and just work. I would get so much done. I did like 2 honors theses because of it. Basically, I was hyper productive because I did not want time to sit alone with my thoughts, and it was very scary to have to tell my boyfriend, my friends, my sister. I remember telling my sister, and I remember telling my mom. And this was before I think we had a good dialogue nationally or internationally about mental health and depression and anxiety in general. I think everyone was very confused because why would someone like me be depressed was kind of the response I got from most people. I would say one of my best friends was really good and understood what I was going through and would stay up late with me and just go on drives. And he would drive and just let me sit and cry or talk, which felt really good. Like I just needed to not be alone in my head because it felt very scary to hear the things that my head felt capable of saying. And fortunately, that passed. And I think in ways change is good because in moving to DC and starting grad school, I felt like I got out of that era of funk a little bit at some point through my senior year. But then at some point in grad school, again, it emerged. And that was very hard because at this point, I was already as productive as I could be. I could no longer use productivity as a way to cope because I was a PhD student. And like, while as a college student, piling on more and more work worked, as a PhD student, I had like all PhD students, I would say most, maybe not all, are already doing about as much work as one can work, right? And so my normal coping mechanism for what I had encountered before was no longer viable. And so there was a point, and I remember telling our mutual friend Leslie about this probably. I was walking on Q Street and I was like inviting opportunities mentally for the world to just like come hurt me if it could, because it would shut up thoughts I had about hurting myself. And this, I don't know where this comes from too. Like, I wish I could explain to you where it comes from or why or what triggers it. But the scary thing about depression is that it's just nothing sometimes. Like sometimes it's just nothing, and sometimes your brain chemistry is such that it is, and it just gets extremely, extremely sad. And then it gets really anxious when you start to notice you're really, really sad and have these thoughts. So one of the big things I did actually in grad school, and I don't know if you'd remember or if you were still living in the house at the time, I just started working out constantly. Like I was probably in some of the best shape of my life, because if I wasn't working on my PhD, or if I wasn't out with friends, if my time wasn't filled with something, then I could fill it with working out. And then there were very minimal hours in the day I had with just my own thoughts alone. But it was, I think, at a point that I was in a pretty serious relationship at that time. And it's very hard to have a committed relationship when you're that depressed. And so I started to see a psychiatrist at this point for treatment, Dr. Dropnik in Georgetown, another person who I would say like probably saved my life and saved me from doing something stupid or forever going untreated, because it is an illness. And he just looked at me after I described all the things I felt, and he just said, "You're sick. And if you don't get medication for this, you will die. Your body will find a way. Your brain, this illness will find a way to make these things a reality. And so you need medicine." And so then that was when I started medication, was probably 1 to 2 years into grad school. So over 10 years ago now. And medication did a wonder for me. I know a lot of people struggle with it and their journey to finding medication, but ever since I've started the medication, I'll have these relapses of depression, but they've never been quite like they were at the start. Like the way they were at the start, I felt like I was constantly having to, it's reminiscent of some of the phrases we were using. Like I felt like I had no control over my own thoughts, and that was very anxiety inducing to me. And so then I would find myself in this spiral of, I know I'm smart. Like in my mind, one of my defining qualities is knowing I am smart, but I have these stupid thoughts I can't stop, and I don't know why I have them. And my parents would tell me things that were well-meaning but not helpful, like be more grateful. And then I would say things like I'm doing my best to be grateful, and yet like I am awake at 3 a.m. every night, sad in ways I don't have words for. And hopefully people who are listening to this who have struggled with depression like understand that feeling, and then the anxiety, if it's coupled with anxiety, the anxiety of, if you're a personality like me, it's like, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? How do I fix this? This constant sense of searching for a mechanism that will let me get by for a little bit. So I did a lot of that, a lot of like tweaking of ways, mostly through productivity or activities to get by. And I think another thing that's hard is that I'm a generally social person. I'm not someone who will also lay cards on the table in that way. Like it was very easy for me to get by being depressed and anxious and not having to treat it. And so it I think I needed like external impetus to see a doctor, because I myself and no one who wasn't in a deep relationship with me would have pushed me in that direction, because by all means I was still functioning fine. If anything, that was when I was doing great in grad school too. Like it was not impacting my life in the ways that you would on a paper say it was impacting life.
Yeah, because your coping mechanisms were socially acceptable, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
And socially rewarded. You
Yeah.
know,
Yes.
some people treat depression by drinking too much, and then you would have been noticed. But
Yeah.
you did, the working out, the productivity were your strategies, and it made it really hard to detect. But
Yeah.
I but
Yeah.
I imagine it must have been really lonely having to carry that.
Yeah, it felt really lonely, and that was one of the hardest things in grad school. And in romantic relationships in general, it's hard to express to someone else. And I say romantic relationships because that's often been the person closest to me. It's hard to express things like, I may love you and like we may be happy, but that does not mean that there's this part in my head that is chronically unhappy for no reason at all. There's no reason it's unhappy. It just is. It just exists that way. And that's a thing that, again, at these points of period in time, I think today in this year, 2026, we've become a lot more aware of how to express those things. But at the time I was experiencing these things, it felt really lonely because I think we lacked a lot of the language and understanding around mental health to cope with these things, or at least that's how it felt to me at the time. And even when it is in years like this, when we have the language, it's still hard to stand up to be the one that says, yeah, I deal with that. Like no one wants to deal with those things. But it feels a lot better now to say like, oh, I'm on this cocktail of these medicines, and to have another girl say, oh, I love Lexapro. Like now there's much more just acknowledgement around it, which is so appreciated. But I think everyone comes to that journey in a lonely way, like for the girls who now all say I'm on Lexapro, and I think a lot of us are, like our journeys there were probably really individual and like deeply lonely in ways, which is how it felt. And I think changing through that for me was hard because it's hard for me. One of the most challenging aspects of depression for me has been opening up to partners about it, like romantic partners, because it feels like laying something very real on the line. And in dating, there's very much this like if you're with me, like this is a part of me, and it doesn't change. I have very little control over it, actually, despite being a person who is 99.9% in control of a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm curious. There's so many things I want to say, but I think I'm just going to start with the most immediate thing is like,
Mhm.
what is the fear for you about revealing your depression to like intimate partners? Like what is so hard about it? And forgive me, as you know, I don't have a lot of experience in relationships, so I'm curious. I know. I'm curious what it meant, what it means in those contexts, or what it feels like for you.
I think, and I'll say I've only really worked through my depression or even expressed it to partners who I felt very seriously about. It feels scary because when I've expressed this, there's this worry of, can you understand me?
Hmm.
Can you, and if you can't understand me, can you understand how to deal with me when I'm going through it? Because even though I'm treated for it, that doesn't mean, like I said, that doesn't mean it hasn't gone away. I definitely get shades and colors of it in the winter, or like right now with cancer, right? Like there's a fear that fortunately I will say again, luckily I have not experienced this in years because I've been with someone like in a very committed way now for a few years. But we did have to have these hard conversations about, how do you, a happy person who doesn't know sadness in this way, understand in your mind that I feel this, and I feel this for sometimes months at a time and other times weeks at a time, and that there is no trigger, there is no anything. Sometimes there's no trigger, sometimes there is, but that like you aren't curative and nothing you do is curative, but like, can you understand? And a very realistic answer could be no,
Hmm.
right? Like it's very realistic that someone could be just like, no, I don't get this. Or it's also realistic that someone could say yes and expect to be helpful and not be,
Hmm.
which in ways is to me kind of worse. Like I've never wanted a partner who I don't believe a partner or partners can cure or fix one's depression. Like that is not the function I believe a partner serves. But I think a lot of people, unfortunately, do see it that way on either side of the dynamic, but for me, I've like long held this belief that that is not the case. Like, would I like help and comfort? Yes, but like, do I want you? Do I have also feared that someone would get upset with themselves if they felt like they weren't being helpful, which is that's very much a thing that happens, you know. So those are the types of things I was fearful of. You know, how does this relationship change the moment I put this card down?
Mm-hmm. Because what you're sharing is something that is unchangeable. It's not something
Right.
that can be controlled.
Yeah.
It's something that's happening to you. And I when you're sharing about these intrusive thoughts that you would have about harming yourself, I've experienced that as well, when I was 18-ish. And it is extremely scary to have that experience. And it's very hard to, because you think that you can control your mind. You kind of assume I can control my thoughts, or like I can control what I do, like within my own body. And to be confronted with that not being true and
Yeah.
how scary that can be is really difficult. And I hear what you're saying. It's like, and again, like I'm only asking this just to understand you and how you felt about your depression,
Mhm.
because it's a way of talking about it. But I can imagine it's and I feel this too in close relationships. It's like, can I share the parts of me that aren't so shiny and pretty?
Yeah.
Would you be okay with it? Because I don't think those things are going to change. I want to be the best version of myself, of course, but I'm a flawed human being, and I have, you know, I, like you, I mean, I would say my depression got better after college, but I go through every winter, I'm depressed, and that's just part of
Same.
it,
Same.
and
Yeah.
I forget that.
And I know it when winter's coming. Like I feel like my mind is like rearing for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you, as you say, it's because of the sun. It's not because of anything anyone's doing, but I can't be this version of myself. And
Yeah.
is that okay? And I think that that's such a tender thing that is so hard for us to do, especially in like United States society, where it's all about like being the best version of yourself. In some ways it can be really tender, and I appreciate also what you say about like how things have changed, because you're right. Like when I was in 2008, when I was going through depression, like no one, it just was hard to talk about. It was hard to figure out.
You think these thoughts are you and you alone because at that
Yeah.
time there wasn't the way there's now. Even I think social media is awful for a lot of things, but it can also be good for other things, right? But like now there are actual communities and posts and awareness. Like people can use the language around it for better or worse. But at the time, it was horrifying. Like what you were just describing, to have these thoughts that were somehow taking over everything for seemingly no reason at all. For briefs, even if they were brief spurts in times, it was, yeah, like just horrifying to have these intrusive, sporadic types of thoughts. And with dating, like you were saying, going back to that, it's also horrifying to say 4 months into dating, I am depressed. And in winter, I've resigned myself to being sad. Like, can you deal with that? Like, or do you need someone truly like, or do you need and want someone who functions a little differently in the winter? Because that's just not me, and I don't want it to be me anymore. Like the older I've gotten, the more I've been, and I'm curious how you feel about it. But now with winter, and my partner expects this too, I'm like, this is, it's my seasonal affective. The sun's not out. I'm truly unhappy. Like I feel it. Like I am not the same person in the winter. The desire to do things at all is very difficult for me to manage in the winter on some days. And so, but that's hard for a partner who doesn't experience that to understand. Like I can imagine being confused and being like, what do you mean you're having trouble waking up to go to work at a job that pays you like for your bed, right? So like on one hand I get it, but it can, even in the best of relationships, like one that I'm in, I believe, like it can still feel lonely,
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah, it makes me think about, I mean, no one can understand your experience. And even I have experienced depression, but my depression is a different flavor from your depression
Yeah.
and maybe had different intensity at different points. And so I can never know what it was like to be you. And I think what you're articulating so well is like we humans, we want to merge and connect, but also we're the only people that are ever going to know fully what it's like to be us.
Yeah.
And how do
Which
you
is kind of
navigate that?
scary. Yeah.
Yes. Like it is. Like
Terrifying.
we can't telepathically connect and I can feel what you were feeling. Like I can only know what you share and how it connects with me. And there that is this and that there is something about that, and for me, like it's, I mean, I've lived most of my life alone, but it's more like it'll surprise me. I'll be like, oh, I keep turning down invitations to do things, or oh, like why do I like everything's wrong in my life? And I'm like, wait, is it January? Like, like
It is crazy how, but I think that's just a sign of how easily it can take over you, right? Like that type of depression, like you can go, these things are technically symptoms, right? The turning down of events, the
Mhm.
things you do, the month that is in fact deep winter, and then you can still not even notice that your own body and mind are saying
Yeah.
this is abnormal compared to a lot of other people,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
At the same time, there are many of us that have these
Yeah.
experiences. And
And
so
it's
it's
just
like a
fine.
both and I
Yeah.
think the thing that has helped me with depression is through like doing meditation practices and stuff is they teach you that your thoughts aren't you. Your thoughts are things that flow through your mind. And so I do have periods of time. It's been a while, but I used to like throughout my 20s, especially in grad school, I would have the thoughts come back like, like all day long, like I wish I was dead. I wish I was dead, like just playing in a loop.
Ugh.
But but over time I came to just realize like that's not me, that's something that's happening to me, and that's just a thought. And I don't I the weight I gave it and the fear I had of it was what made it so like was partially what made it so difficult,
Yeah.
and the pain lessened when I just was like, this is something that's happening and it's going to pass. I mean, it's been a long time actually since I've experienced that, but that was like I would have waves of that. And I think all I want to say about that is like again, like it's this experience of surrender, and it's this experience of like um I can't find the right words, but like that your experience is your experience and no one can fully understand what it is to be you, and some level we have to accept that but of course it doesn't mean we don't share what's going on with us, but it's that tension that's always there of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm going through, I want you to accept it because I don't know if you could ever understand it, if that makes
Right. Yeah. And there's an element of the surrender thing, I think resonates with me a lot because the moment I got diagnosed and the moment I started medication, everything became more manageable for
sense.
me from that point on, because then it wasn't this, to what you were saying, this question of, is this me? Like, do I want this? Is there a part of me that feels this way? Because at that point I could name it as, oh, this is an illness.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thing that I happen to have and have to deal with, but that doesn't mean it has to be an end all be all. It can just be a thing I, deliberately manage over my life. And that isn't the best thing ever, but that's fine. Was kind of my attitude and remains my attitude about it. I don't love it. And it's very annoying when it flares up. But, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. This
Nothing.
this is something this is something that meets you every so often, but you've gotten the treatment to make it more manageable and you've
Yeah.
taken that step, and you've surrendered to this as part of
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I think I'm feeling the call to move on, but I want before I do that, like, is there anything that you've learned from this experience or from having gone through this that you want to share or that you feel like has impacted how you're dealing with things now?
I think, I mean, in terms of the element of surrender, that was, and maybe that just became a blueprint for how I navigate big disappointments or big stress of I don't know how to say it, like the big cosmic kind, like big things that are far beyond my control, like recognizably beyond my control. Yeah, like at the hospital, I felt a sense of, like I said, when they diagnosed me, surrender, like that this is the diagnosis. This is what it is. That doesn't mean surrender doesn't mean I won't fight cancer, that I don't intend to beat cancer, but like I'm not here to ask for more tests. I'm not, like I'm now in a position to plan
Mm.
uh, for what comes next. And I personally prefer being in that position. Also as a coping mechanism. I think those two things interplay for me for sure. Like by accepting something, I can work to move on and navigate the day. So I think I just kind of took a lesson from it in terms of, or even just a habit. That's how I navigate a lot of disappointments now. I am not one to argue differently from the world. I think if something is put my way that is uncontestable,
Mm.
I will plan around it.
Yeah. And, truly, a lot of people don't do that. You
Yeah,
know,
I know. It
it,
sounds like that shouldn't be novel, but a lot of people don't. I do think a lot of people uh, act like a plane landed on their face. You know what I mean? Or get like I wasn't upset when I was told I was depressed. Like I had already been upset. Do you know? Like I think one of the worst things you can do in general is be upset about what the world has given you, as easy as I know that that is, but there is a large percentage of this world who I think can reasonably feel that way, and I just don't believe I'm one of them on a relative scale. And so like even like so from depression and other things, like I am not one to often feel sorry for myself or sad about a thing that has happened to me in that way.
yeah, it's a nuanced conversation, and I appreciate you bringing in like the idea of, your for lack of a better word, your privileges. You have a lot of things and you want to be appreciative for what you have. And I think more important, or what I want to highlight of what you said is like there is, you can, and it's natural to be like, why is this happening to me, to be angry and to be upset at the same time. And I think it's important to process those emotions if that's what's up for you. At the same time, when something comes that's out of your control, fighting it is kind of a waste of energy. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
And it's often better to surrender, accept, and then see what you can kind of find. It's like when you're in the ocean and like you see a huge wave coming, like it's not always the best idea to like try to swim over it or to
No,
get
you
like
cannot. I have learned this. Yeah.
you learn this the hard way.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
better to go under and surrender to this experience. And so I think that I appreciate you lifting that up because I think it is important, because we all
Yeah.
have these experiences. And another thing that you and I share is that we both lost a parent.
Mhm.
And I I'm trying to remember the exact timeline, but I think you had gotten treatment for depression and
Mhm.
were on a better track. And can you just talk to me about that experience and that, yeah, like just kind of share a little bit about how the death of a parent kind of entered your life.
Yeah, it entered my life very suddenly. And I think the suddenness of things has like echoed in my life since. It's something I've thought about a lot since. So at this point in time, I was preparing to defend my dissertation. I had been at this point, I'd spent like 2 or so years moving out of a depressive period and being diagnosed and was being treated for it, and things were going really well. I had a great relationship with my mom. My mom is, if you looked up a textbook definition of mom, my mom was that textbook definition. And so things with her were great. We were texting a lot because I was about to move for my postdoc. So she was helping me navigate some of that and we were getting geared up for me to defend my dissertation. So it was generally a very exciting time. I was dating someone I really liked, and he and I had navigated me being depressed, which was good. Social life was great. Everything was like, by all means, awesome. And then I was at home in DC where I was living with my then boyfriend and got a phone call from my dad that my mom had had a seizure and that he'd call back with more information. And I started crying after that phone call immediately because I knew it was bad. I just knew that if a perfectly normal person had had a seizure out of nowhere, it was bad. And a lot of my reactions then were very similar to now. Immediately I went to, well, I hope it's just epilepsy. Like, I hope it's just freak epilepsy that she, is randomly about to get diagnosed with versus she's going to die in 10 hours. And through the phone calls that I was getting in the night, again, now that I'm recognizing this, and I've not said this out loud before or thought this before, but similar to when I was in the hospital, every signal was getting clearer and clearer that it was, luck was not in our favor or her favor, our family's favor. She went into a coma at one point in the night, which we all knew was bad. And then they had to wait for a doctor with the expertise to do a certain type of brain surgery. And then I will say an added layer to this is that my PhD was in neuroscience. So there was this added layer of like, why did it have to be the brain? Like, of all the things, like, did it have to be like the only organ in the body that I fucking care about? Which sounds trivial and stupid, but I remember at the time feeling like very sensitive about it. Because my dad kept calling about brain scans, which were like the only medical thing in the world I remotely knew anything about. And then by the time it was morning and my dad had called me in the evening prior, they had done the brain surgery and found that there was no blood going to her brain. And so she was dead. And this was very difficult for me and my siblings because we have a very conservative religious family. And so for days they kept her intubated despite what I knew were her like wishes, which were, she told me, and I don't know why she'd tell me these things, but I think sometimes older people, and she wasn't old, mind you, she was like 56, but she was like, never let me be a vegetable if something happens to me. But we had many family members who kept her intubated for days in the hospital. So I sat with my mom's corpse in the hospital for maybe like 3 to 4 days because they believed that some prayer would revive her. And I remember that being one of the most upsetting things because my sibling, the youngest one at the time, was 14 and just starting high school at a new school. And my sister and I had to be the ones to tell her, like, mom is dead, not like in a coma, not we're praying to wake her up, like she's dead. And like what other adults are telling you isn't true. And so that was really hard for us. A lot of really hard, like screaming matches too in the hospital room where doctors were getting involved. And finally, after 3 to 4 days, they said, this is getting a little like medically irresponsible. Like, we're keeping this dead woman intubated. Not only is it expensive, like we highly recommend you move on. And my sister and I, from like moment one, were like, yes, please get me out of this hospital room. And then I stayed in Arizona and threw a funeral. And then I came back and wrote my dissertation. And then again, similar to what I said earlier about depression, like that experience was one that let me stay hunkered down inside and finish a dissertation, graduated in the 5 years required, got a good postdoc. It just kept me very productive, for lack of a better word. I did not want to spend time. I mean, I was processing it and dealing with it, but I felt so overwhelmed by grief, I think, that any thoughts of revisiting memories of the hospital room or the phone calls felt so overwhelming that I would let myself have them, but it was also very useful in terms of wanting to sit down and just hunker down and work for months after that. It was very useful for finishing a dissertation, actually. I wasn't necessarily in the mood to go socialize. I wasn't in the mood to do a lot of things. I was in the mood to sit down and write. And so that's how those next months came. And then I, about 3 to 5 months after all of this, packed my bags and moved to Boston. And I think at that time I was welcoming a lot of change. Like I was like, I welcome this next stage of my life. Like I welcome a move. I welcome a new roommate. There was this feeling of like, get me out of this era. Like this was, I had thought this was going to be a good time. It was not. Like I had a lot of feelings of, I think even if I hadn't been in an era of planned change, like these were all things that were going to happen, I think I would have sought change regardless because there was no coming back to what was previously before that, I think. So that was what happened. And it was very hard for me. It remains very hard for me because it was so sudden. What it was, I realized I never said it was a ruptured brain aneurysm, a random one. We actually learned that they're familial. So now I get tested with brain scans to make sure I don't have any, which I was part of my health journey this year when I learned I had cancer. But it's tough. Losing a parent is really tough. I think it's it's hard to lose a parent too, also prematurely because of, I mean, it sounds so stupid, but all of the moments they miss, or all the moments you miss too, because they miss them. There are a lot of things like that that crop up in everyday life that I think make me sad. And sometimes they're minute things and sometimes they're big things. And a lot of the times it's small things like my mom would have liked this ice cream flavor, less so than the big things. And now with cancer, I'm like, God, how would have my mom dealt with this? And it would have been, the answer is terribly. I mean, she would have been terribly sad about it. But it's a lot of those, what could life have looked like for this person? And those are, I think, sometimes the saddest thoughts to have. But yeah, there was a lot of change in that time and change within a year after that. I think that boyfriend and that I said and I broke up like in the months later or a year later. Like I think after my mom died, I was itching for a lot of new and different in ways that I wasn't at the time recognizing.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's, what strikes me about what you shared is like just how jarring it is, how jarring
Yeah.
it is. Like you were bursting with this like new world you were going to be moving into and this like finally finishing your PhD, what an incredible accomplishment. And then just in a day, you're in a
Yeah.
different reality. And
Yeah.
then that's a lot to metabolize. That's a lot to process. And I think it makes sense that you titrated that in your own
Yes.
way.
That's a great way to put it. I think I titrated it. I think it's still titrating. I feel grief at, as I'm sure you do, it hits at odd moments. It's really like for me, it's never moments I would expect. And I can feel it crop up when I know I haven't dealt with it. Like if like 2 or 3 weeks go by and I haven't thought about it in a real way, I can tell that my body is like itching to search that well a little bit. So I was not the type to deal with it all at once. I very much wanted to take my time and process it because it all felt like so much at once, like in between the rapid phone calls that took place within 8 hours and then booking a ticket to Arizona, having to tell my sisters, having to be in that hospital, planning a funeral. There was so much new reality that happened in a 2 week time span that the thought of then immediately going into grief therapy or something was like the last thing I wanted to do. The last thing I wanted to do was journal about it. The last thing I wanted to do was, yeah, even think about it deeply. I just wanted to feel a semblance of normal's not the right word, but like a sense of I'm adapting to a new life. Like I've accepted this has happened and it's terrible. And I think it will be one of the worst things that's happened to me in my life. But like, I have to live through that, like that was the way I think I was trying to feel about it at that time. And I think in ways is how I'm trying to feel about this too. Like I have not had a big hour long I have cancer cry. Like that has not happened. I've had small ones, but I don't really have a desire to feel existentially sad about it for a long period of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's very protective. It's like you know what your system can handle
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
allowing what it can handle into your body. And even like you mentioned in the beginning that you have such a strong connection with your body, like you know when something's off. And when you talked about like feeling every couple weeks like your body feels off, like you need to process some of your grief around your
Mhm.
mom, is showing me like the intelligence you have in your own system. Like everyone's different. Some people want to go head first and dive all the way in. Some people don't. And I think we know what we need. And I just want to reflect back that it's very clear that you have that inner sense within yourself to know that. The one thing I want to ask, and you can say no to this question, but grief, and especially like for me, for me it's different because I was so young. There's so much. It's more about it's way more about what I didn't have than what I did.
Yeah.
But for you, you had your mom, and
Mhm.
she, as you said, she was a great mom, and I was wondering if you feel comfortable telling me about her and what
Yeah,
you
of
think about her.
course. I love talking about her. She came here from the Philippines separately from my dad. She came here without paperwork. So I believe she came here legally because and like if anyone gets literally actually anything out of listening to this, it's that, I mean, people come here and immigrate to this country for reasons we as Americans born here and given what we have do not understand. Like she gave up what was still considerably a decent life, but like risked a lot to be the first of her siblings to come to America. She was in beauty pageants in the Philippines and had saved up money to come here. And when she came here, she went to Manhattan because that was where her aunt was living, and her aunt helped her get a job and live in her apartment. And so she became my aunt's assistant, but then got a job in Rockefeller Center, like doing some like pre-accounting level work. That was her college degree. And she met my dad because my dad was a resident at Mount Sinai at the time. She was very artistic. She was really good at drawing. She made all of my costumes growing up. She made my prom dress. I think had she lived another life, and she'd say this too, like she would have loved being a fashion designer or interior designer or something that involved like something artistic and also something textile. Also in our home, like all of our curtains, our pillows, they were all made by her. Like she, I think, was unfortunately relegated to being a housewife and was kind of excellent at finding new skills to pass the time. Like she had known how to sew, but one doesn't just inherently know how to sew a pillow or curtains or things like that. She loved movies. Her favorite movie was Tropic Thunder or White Chicks. Like she loved also Shaun of the Dead. She loved British humor too. Yeah, I don't know that I'd call her a funny person, but she liked humor. She was not turned off by like crass humor or anything like that. And she was also like deeply understanding of me. I wouldn't say that I was an easy teenager. I was a difficult teenager. Like she knew I was having sex early. She knew I was rebellious. She knew I was depressed but didn't understand it. And she was just a very like flexible, forgiving person. Like when I say she's a textbook mom, like I think she was someone who could mother like almost anybody. Like she could find empathy for almost anyone. She was also a textbook mom because growing up, people loved coming to our house because she would order like a full on, I don't know, like catered deal from Panda Express for like 3 kids who were coming over for a school project, like that kind of person. Like if she knew kids were coming over after the playground, there would be like 10 pizzas, 5 sides, and like a baggie of take home goods kind of stuff. Like she was that kind of person. She made being a mom when she was at home, like her job. Like she was like a career mom, even though she didn't want to be. There's sadness to her life too. Like I think she wanted to work. Like she wanted to do things. I think she was itching, especially by the time she had passed, like was looking to get back in the workforce. And this was once our youngest of our torre family was in high school. And one of the saddest things I have is actually her notebook of the time. She was counting down the days until she left my dad at like that point in time. They were in a strained part of their relationship, and she'd gotten hired at a new job just like a few months before passing, and she was beloved by everybody there. Like when she died, like those people showed up in droves. And so I have the last notebook that she was keeping track of, like a new era of her life in, with words like in her home language, Tagalog, like I'm finally free, which is really sad. But I mean, she was just, people aren't flawless, but like the lens I got to have of her, and I'm grateful for it, was a near flawless one. And we still fought because I'm human and she was a mom and I was a teenager. So we definitely fought, but like the lens I get to keep of her is one I'm very grateful for. Like she was truly the best mom I could have ever imagined in my life. And so really when I like mourn her, I think of the world losing someone like that. Like I hate that of the people. I mean, it's a terrible thought, but like people die all the time. And the fact that this person who was just trying to have a good life in America died, like, and was just trying to like find a new era of her life, died. It's when I'm sad, I think about those things. I think those things are really heavy. And then I think too about like how other good people must die all the time. And I think it's awful in a world of, when I get the saddest about it, it's when I'm comparing it to like the world we live in. And it's a world we live in not by our choice, but we make the choices that build this world, right? And so, yeah, I miss having that sense of good around me because it was always something very, very grounding for me. I think her being a mom and the childhood I got to have defined a lot of my life today. Her choice to come here illegally, like, defines my life. Yeah, yeah. And then a lot of the things she advised me to do, she was the one who told me to come to Georgetown instead of the other schools. I think the last text I have of her is she sent me a chicken meme saying hello. Yeah, like, so it's a lot of like, frankly, just like genuine good memories that I have of her. Yeah. And she would have handled the cancer terribly because she was like, as I've described, a mom. Like, she would be unwell right now. Though my dad, I actually will say, has been handling this great.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Like just hearing you talk, I started to tear up, and I'm just moved by, I don't know, your love for her.
Yeah, I loved my mom, and if I repeat it, I'll cry. But my mom was, yeah, she was everything, and it was to a lot of people. Like we had to have a 2-day funeral so that enough people, like, so people could come in from all over the world. Yeah, I mean, to her testament, she raised 3 kids who, like, by all means are doing fine, and she did everything she wanted to do in that regard. And I think I just feel really sad she didn't get to do other things. But yeah, we just like loved her so much. Like in terms of, my aunt actually said that when my mom was living with her, as I said, she'd separated from my dad. So my mom moved in with my aunt not that long before she passed away. Apparently my mom was having some premonitions or something. Like she was just being really cryptic. And she was, though, the type of person who would say things like, don't make me a vegetable when I die. She apparently had told my aunt, when I die, all I want on my tombstone is a great mom. Like the importance of being a mother to her was a very deep one that I like hope I get to understand as a mom one day. But like, yeah, it's something that, yeah, was clearly very deeply important to her. Not that it isn't deeply important to all moms, but I think that for her, as someone who came to this country with nothing and then wound up in a marriage that maybe wasn't exactly what she had expected. Like her kids were everything, like that it was everything to her to be a good mom. So losing her was very hard, remains very hard. And yeah, like you said, I definitely titrate that grief. And I think it's because I will have this grief forever. And so I know, especially now that I'm growing up, like experiencing eras of life that like, like seeing other people become moms, I think too a lot about like, I wonder what she was like when she was pregnant. But those are questions where in my early 20s, when I was texting her about being hungover, I was never going to text her about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But now I'm like, I wish I would have known those things, but those weren't questions I would have asked until this age.
It can be hard living with those what ifs. And
Yeah.
but I think what I feel the most from what you shared is just the love she had for you that I can feel in you, that
Yeah.
lives on in you, and with grief, it's not, um, we feel grief because we felt love, you know?
Yeah. It's like trite but true. I think one of the things I think about the most is one of her coworkers actually came to our house to deliver us a lot of forms and a lot of goodies. And he said, I just want you kids to know that she loved you desperately. And that was like one of the most moving things someone said to me, that like a coworker knew about us enough to say that. Apparently she just yapped about us all the time. But I mean, that's love. It's love. And it's why it's so hard still all these years, and will be hard years down the road, to continue to think about her and like what memories I have. And sometimes every now and then I find a new memory of her, and I'm so happy because sometimes I replay the same ones in my head and I worry I'm losing them all. But when I think of a new one, I'm ecstatic, which is always like a re-meeting of her in ways. And I always love that. And
Yeah.
seeing, I will say, my younger sister looks a lot like her.
Mhm.
And so seeing her have some of the same mannerisms that she had too is fun for me to, yeah, to watch as I grow older, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about parents is that, yeah, she's gone, but she lives on through you and
Yeah.
through your siblings.
Yeah.
It's like this kind of strange magic that,
Yeah.
like she appears in your sister and she appears in you in a lot of ways. And, one thing that struck me about her story is the courage that it took to do the things that she did, to move to this country, to
Yeah.
start all over again. And, I see that in you now, and
I hope. Yeah. I think about those parts of her a lot, especially now with cancer. I have a lot of like, what would someone with that gusto do? Like if I was someone like that, or like worthy of being like that, how would I navigate this? I do think about that a lot. Like how would someone I look up to deal with cancer? Is something that maybe it's stupid, but I am trying to think of that because I'm only going to have cancer, at least in the near future, once.
yeah.
I would like to do it in a way that I feel proud of, I think.
Mm. So that brings me back to today, but as my transition question, you know, what I see in this story, and you can confirm or deny or shift or shape it differently, but you have had the experience of your reality shifting on a dime. You've had that experience. You know that life has that up for on the table, At the same time, this has a different quality. This is a different experience. This is your body. It's very different. You're the one in the hospital bed this time. But I'm curious how this grief experience, how this loss, how it shaped you and how it's made you the person that's meeting this moment now.
I've definitely had moments of, I think that as humans, we innately have this, oh, bad things happen so that dot, dot, dot.
Mm,
And so I've had these thoughts of, well, I dealt with depression so that dot, 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 I could become more empathetic. And my mom died so that dot, 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 I could learn whatever lesson I was supposed to learn. But now I'm like, I I have to deal with 3 of these things in order, what am I, what magic am I about to learn that like, and why me? Like, how, how were these 3 things necessary? And like Cancer had to be the 3rd at this age, like I couldn't wait until later on. But I think, I don't know. I just like to think, I hope that I'm resilient. I also hope that life is really good to me. Like life has given me a lot of things that a lot of people have to work very hard for. Life has just put in my little lap and let me have. And so with these things presented at me, I think starting with depression and then my mom and now this, I think a lot of my mindset has just been, this is it, like this is what it is. And what am I going to do about that? Like nothing. I'm not going to change my personality because I'm not interested in that and it sounds too hard. I'm not going to feel more sad than I naturally feel because I know what that feels like because of depression and I don't like it. And I worked very hard to not feel like that. I'm not going to be downtrodden about this more than I naturally feel because I don't want my family to experience another loss. Like I've thought about that in terms of, my dad and my siblings. Like the last thing I want to do is for them to feel more unnecessary grief and unnecessary stress about something. And like when I've thought about what the best thing I can do for them is, it's to be positive about this. And doctors are positive about it. So I'm not echoing other than what's being medically told to me. So I also don't want my partner to feel like who was effectively my caretaker at this point, right? Like there are only so many times and days that I think a caretaker can deal with someone who's defeated. And so I think like through all of these things, I know it's not a satisfying answer, but my thought is just, this is it. I have it incredibly easy in a lot of ways. And I don't know why I keep thinking of it as an offset or something, but I also have to deal with these things and that's okay too. Because, like you said, grief is love. Like I had a mom that not a lot of other people get to have, truly. And she also lived a life that not a lot of other people who immigrate illegally get to have. Like my family got to live a certain kind of life. And depression has also given me, I don't want to say that I feel things more because of depression. That's not exactly what I think of it, but I definitely think it gives me a sharper lens in some ways. I don't know that I would say I'm grateful for depression per se, because I do think it's very hard, but I do think that like it has certainly prepped me for this like circumstance, like dealing with that medically and being able to say like I am anxious, which I've had to do multiple times during procedures, has been incredibly helpful. Like I actually think it would be very hard to have undiagnosed depression and anxiety, or know that those, or not know that those types of thoughts can float within you, and then encounter a diagnosis like this or something like a parent suddenly dying. Like I felt very equipped when my mom died to handle my sadness, I'll say, and I feel very equipped now again to like handle the sadness that comes with this diagnosis. Like there have been or a surprising amount of like a lack of sadness, I would say, actually, about cancer so far. But I think it's because I dealt with those 2 other things.
I appreciate those reflections. And what keeps coming through my mind as you were talking was you're lucky and you're unlucky.
Yeah.
Lucky and you're unlucky.
You're lucky and you're unlucky. And I'm just hopeful I'm lucky through this. Like this itself is an unlucky thing, but it's also very possible that I get treatment and that then I'm one of the lucky ones who, gets treated and it gets put in a remission and then cured. So and then I get to go on living a lucky, unlucky, lucky, unlucky, lucky, unlucky life. Like that's
Yeah.
life, you know? Like a lot of people I think are lucky, unlucky in much quieter ways. Like I think in small ways that are like chronically difficult or difficult in other ways that we don't, again, still maybe don't talk about. I think in ways, and this sounds bad, but I've been lucky that like especially with my mom and with this cancer diagnosis, like with those things came like community and support. Like the amount of support I've been getting through for this, and when my mom died, like really carried me through. Like it sustained me. But there are things people deal with that are like near silent and lonely, and things that I truly don't know. Like I really am lucky in a lot of avenues in life and have not felt difficulty in a lot of ways that I think a lot of people do. And they don't get DMs of support for those things, right? Like
Mm.
no one roots for you when you say I had a bad date. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I've been thinking about that a lot. Like I've been blessed with a lot of things and this really sucks, but luck lands where it lands and it lands randomly, I believe. And nothing controlled this other than a random set of cell mutations. And that's, you know, them's the breaks. Like, what am I going to do? Yeah, I will say from a changed perspective, though, like you can have all these rapid changes happen to you in your history and it can still be difficult. So, something that happened to me in the hospital was that I started my treatment and I started off pretty well, but I would say a couple days in, I spent 3 to 4 days unable to keep any food down despite being on the best in class medication for nausea. I was also like unable to read anything. Like I couldn't look at my phone, my tablet, a book, and that was devastating because I was like, well, I can't keep food down. I can't look at anything. How on earth am I ever going to manage this as an outpatient if these are the side effects that I have? And so after 3 to 4 days of that, the doctors came in and they were like, so we know that you have anxiety. And I was like, yeah. And then they said, we also think you have adjustment disorder because the nausea side effects and the headaches are a primary side effect I have, but they weren't supposed to be that bad. They were telling me that they told me that I was adjusting to this new reality and essentially like making myself vomit because I was so like it was rapid. One day I was going into work and the next I had a bone marrow biopsy and then the next thing I had leukemia. So they were like, it's very like expected that someone like you who's had these mental issues in the past, or even if you hadn't, to make yourself feel sicker because you're trying to deal with the fact that you're very ill. And he kind of said all this with a smile. And then I smiled because I was like, this makes sense. Like, I have adjustment disorder, and that's why I've been vomiting. And then again, they prescribed me a new medication, and then it all stopped. So, like, it's just crazy. Like, your mind can do so many things, and just naming it, like, truly, like, back to something we were saying earlier, like, just naming the fact that my head was making me elevate my symptoms in the hospital. He smiled and I smiled. And even my boyfriend, who knows that I'm like a mental like case, was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Yeah, we were all like, and then we all laughed. And then he was like, yeah, so we're going to give you meds and you should stop vomiting. And I did. So, like, I love that it's called adjustment disorder because I think, yeah, like sometimes we struggle to adjust, and I did. Like, and then sometimes you find ways to fix it, and then we did. And now I feel readjusted. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I love this story because it just speaks to uh the power of naming things and also the power of like telling the truth about a situation. Like there is like a way that sometimes when we are on the edges of like accepting something in our reality, like we're pushing it away because we don't want to face it because we're afraid we can't. But then sometimes when we do face it, it like loses its power. you know?
Yeah, he was, yeah. I basically spent 3 days, I think, grappling with being on, I wasn't processing, I'm on chemo now. Like I am on medication and I might have these side effects. And I think I was so fearful of the side effects you hear from chemo that I was somehow like mentally and thus physically imparting them on myself, even though I shouldn't have been experiencing them, which is crazy. And like I was maladjusting to it. And instead of just saying whatever the side effects are, they are, I was like giving them more power than they needed to have. And so when the doctor said you're having an adjustment disorder to this new part of reality, I was just very thankful they said that. Because then, and my dad was in the room too. He was like, oh, yeah, like this is tough. We were all just like, this is hard. And then, yeah, just kind of moved like the moment the doctor and then all of us in the room, it was almost comedic then because there are like 8 residents there learning.
Right.
We're all
You
looking
have
at
an
me.
audience.
Yeah, hearing this doctor say none of the other patients on this drug experience this typically, I was like, oh. Yeah, collectively, we all just kind of laughed and had a moment where we were like, you just need to like adjust.
Right.
And then,
It's
yeah,
like you're letting yourself getting pummeled by the waves, and they reminded you, no, you have to dive down.
correct.
You have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
accept
Yeah.
this,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
So
know,
it
and
was a really good moment for me in the hospital. Yeah.
and I think it reminds me, I mean, again, we've talked about this in a lot of different ways, but it's one of the most like fascinating things I learned from meditation is I'd be in retreat and I'd be experiencing some physical pain. And they would talk about how sometimes our resistance to the pain makes the pain worse, like your mental resistance to the pain. And so you would try to like, okay, I accept this pain. I'm accepting that I'm feeling a little uncomfortable in this moment, and it would decrease immediately, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's like how our mind can exacerbate some of the symptoms physically that we're experiencing in any moment.
Yeah.
And you just needed to be reminded of that truth. It was kind of like like an exercise of like, okay, this is the reality. And if we just accept it, the pain will be less.
Yeah. And today I had a similar experience too. So, like I said, when we first started, one of the things today I did today was go to my oncologist because I've been experiencing some side effects over the weekend. Some of the muscle pain that I first felt that drove me into the hospital, they said they wanted to come in and just do more testing. And so then they did. All my tests came back really good, which is good. And then we just had another chat where they were like, you have cancer, and so you'll feel bad some days. And so again, my boyfriend and I were like, oh, right. Like, and then I immediately felt better. Like I just needed someone to name it. It goes back to this naming thing and this acceptance of like, this is cancer. It's not a walk in the park, but people do this all the time. But like it does help to just say it, name it, act like it, and just deal with it instead of thinking every moment is going to be a linear process of healing or something, because it's just not going to look like that. Yeah, they had to have a reminder of, some days will be tougher than others and some days are going to be better than others. And we were like, oh, right. Like, duh.
Of course, but it's important to have those reminders because you're not used to living life from this context and from this
No,
experience.
no.
So you just have a different baseline. And so you're kind of, accepting that for this period of time where you're on treatment, you're living in a different experience and you have a different baseline for understanding
Yeah.
things. But I feel like we're coming to the end of our time. And I, first of all, want to thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been really special. And I really am so grateful. But I'm curious, like looking forward, into your treatment, what are you bringing with you? What are you taking with you? What perspectives? What's animating you as you kind of move forward?
That's a great question. What am I taking with me? Well, in addition to all the puzzles, the books, everything, I think some of the favorite messages I've gotten from people have been about like guts and strength. And so I every day I'm just hoping my little cells have the guts and the strength to fight this off. That's what I'm taking with me. I know it sounds so silly, but like what I'm carrying with me constantly is an attitude of I hope that these little Gabrielle cells with this treatment are like waging a war, like a petty little war, like a Gabrielle kind of war on cancer cells. It's a thought. I say I'm taking that with me because it makes me happy. It makes me laugh. It amuses me.
Mhm.
I, yeah, that's like how I'm thinking about the treatment at this moment, is like thinking of little cells with my head on them, annoying the shit out of cancer and making it leave my body. Like that's the thought that's been giving me some joy in all of this, actually. Um, just these like annoying, incessant little cells, like fighting for their territory. That's what I'm taking with me, probably, is that. But I think with that comes like my type of joy and humor. Like
Mm.
I decided early on, I wrote down early on a list of things and intentions I had for this like phase of my life, and it was that I wasn't going to let this rob me of joy.
Mm.
Like I'm supposed to go through 5 treatments of this, so that's theoretically a little more than 5 months, and I just refuse to be miserable during that time. So I've decided that's just the attitude that I'm going to have, is some guts and a refusal to be gotten down, I think.
I
Yeah,
love
and an image of little cells of my head, like
fighting it
jab.
out.
Yeah. I love, every now and then when I get down about it, I think about that, and I don't know why, but it makes me really happy to think about my little cells just like doing the best work they've ever done or something. That honestly has kept me like laughing through it all, because in ways that is what's happening with the drugs. They're like the drugs that I'm on are yanking my immune system and making them fight cancer cells, and I love that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so true. Like there is such a power in humor. There
Yeah.
is such a power in laughing in the face of the universe. And the universe wants us to laugh at it because it does some fucked shit to
The
us.
universe is crazy, and I just had to share a shower in a hospital for about 3 weeks, and it's funny and dark, but it happened. Like
Yeah.
we had days in the hospital, I mean, that were really, like I said, 3 to 4 days that were really bad. But we also had, I mean, my dad came to visit, and I think oddly, some of our favorite memories together will come from the hospital.
Mm.
Like, and my youngest sister too, she came. And my boy, like we laughed a lot in the hospital. So like I think I'm taking a sense of levity and humor and joy with me. I think it's the only way I'll get through it, I think, and approach this change.
And I feel that so much in your writing too, in your
Yeah.
Substack. Like there's such a humor that you bring to it. And it's so healing, and it's the power of humor is it gives us like this softness that allows us to look at the truth. Does that make sense? And to face
Yeah, I love that.
does that make sense? Like I find like comedians, they always say the thing that no one is willing to say, and they only are able to do that because they make it lighter somehow.
Yes. And a lot of comedians have struggled deeply with depression,
Yes.
things like that. Like, I think sometimes in having to sit in really dark places, you find a really fucking funny thing. Like, that somehow in this world of madness exists. Like, there were moments in the hospital where I was like, I mean, like, I'm surrounded by people dying, and yet, dot, dot, dot. Like,
Yeah.
and still, so but I found that really helpful for me, and it continues to be helpful.
And I'm glad that you have those tools in your toolkit as you
Yeah.
go forward and beat this thing and come to the other side, you know. And yeah, again, just I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad that you're in my life, and I really
Mutual.
am. Yeah, I'm really just super grateful for you, and I'm so
Yeah. Thank you for having me on this and for letting me be on this. It's been so fun to watch you transition into podcast host extraordinary.
yeah, I mean it's been crazy and letting you. I mean, gosh, I'm so glad to have you on, and
It
I'm
was one of my first thoughts. I will say, when I got,
really
I think I finally have a story to tell.
Yeah, of course, I wasn't gonna be like, yeah, Gabrielle, I'm sorry you have cancer. You want to be on my podcast? That would be a terrible thing. But when you brought it up, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I would love to have this because I love this shit.
Yeah.
Which is why I have this podcast. So anyway, I guess we